You're listening to the Unstoppable Teen Podcast, episode number 41. Welcome to Unstoppable Teen, the podcast for teenagers, parents, and teachers. My name is Kevin Mincher. Every week, we will bring you an inspirational person or message to help you experience more success and happiness. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let's get this party started. Hello, Unstoppable Nation, it's Kevin here. Welcome to the show. In this episode, I want to show you what to do in the last 24 hours before an important test or exam. You see, right here in Britain, my home country, not my own, I don't own it, but it's my home country, where I live, where I was born and raised. And right here, right now, students are heading into exam season. In fact, it's getting into full swing. And whether that's 15-year-old students, 16, 17 and 18-year-old students have all got some really important exams. And our government here, I don't know about where you live, has made some pretty significant changes to how students get their grades. In the past, when I was in high school, you used to be able to do lots of coursework, essays, assignments and things like that. And you could gather points towards your final grade over a 2-year course. Now that still exists in some subjects, but other subjects have now gone to 100% of your final grade being based on how well you do in those final tests and exams. That's remarkable. Some would say that's really harsh. But you see, here's the problem. Back in the past, when we could bank some points in coursework, some people would, frankly, cheat. They'd either get their mum and dad to do some of that coursework. They might even copy and paste certain assignments that have been done in the past from the internet. Indeed, in some cases, teachers would sort of unfairly help and assist their students in completing the coursework and getting better grades than they actually deserved. So the government made a decision. And the government said, well, to stop all that cheating happening, we'll make it 100% all on the final grade. That means you could have been the best student ever for your entire life up until now. You could have had 100% attendance, done all the coursework, all the assignment, but you still go into your exams with 0 grades, nothing. And the score that you get is based on how well you do on that exam day. Now, the problem with that is many schools don't teach their students how to perform well in these high-pressure situations. They think that focusing on the curriculum alone is enough, but it's not. You see, there are other things that influence human performance other than knowledge. And in this case, knowledge of the national curriculum is not enough. There are other things that you need to do in the last 24 hours before an important test or exam to make sure that you perform well in that test or that exam. Now, recently, over the last few weeks, I've been on tour presenting seminars in schools all over the country. And it was when I was in the northwest of England at a school over there where a student started telling me his concerns, that he'd been a good student so far, but he was under all this pressure to do well in his final exams because 100% of his grade was based on how well he did in that exam. And he said, Kev, what do I do? Nobody's ever told me what to do in the last 24 hours before an exam so I can perform at my best in that exam. So that's what this episode is all about. Okay, so let's get cracking. If you've been following along with Unstoppable Teen for a while and you've listened to previous episodes or you've attended any of my programs, you'll know that I believe in something that I call holistic learning. In other words, knowledge of the curriculum alone is not enough. There are certain things that you have to do mentally, emotionally, and physically, as well as mastering the curriculum, if you want to do well in tests and exams. And so, I want to give you a few simple pointers about what to do in the last 24 hours before an important test and exam so you can perform at your best in that situation. First of all, let's get after what to do mentally. Now, in those last hours before an exam, that is not the time to be focusing on learning something new or trying to get to grips with an element of the curriculum that you haven't been able to figure out yet. By going after something new, students often create unnecessary doubt right before an exam. They start to go into panic mode of, oh, I don't know this stuff. Oh, I'm going to fail. I'm just going to do all wrong. And so what you need when you're going into an exam is you need to feel certain. You need to have some confidence in your talent and in your abilities. And so what I encourage students to do is to focus on the 20% of the curriculum that tends to show up in tests and exams 80% of the time. You may or may not be familiar with a guy called Pareto. Now, Pareto was an Italian economist, and apparently he had this theory decades ago that 80% of the wealth of a country comes from 20% of its citizens. Seems obvious today, but back then it was a breakthrough thought. And it turns out this 80-20 rule isn't just about where the wealth of a country and an economy is owned. It applies to other things. Now, if you look back at previous tests and exams over the years, you'll see that time and time again, in any given subject, the same sorts of questions keep coming up year after year after year. For example, let's say you're going to take a mathematics exam. The questions that show up in a maths exam this year will be similar to the questions that showed up in a maths exam last year. And they showed up the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. They won't ask exactly the same question in exactly the same way. But what I'm saying is the same sorts of topics will keep showing up. The same elements of the curriculum will keep showing up. And it's your job ahead of exams to know what those common elements are that keep showing up. And in the last 24 hours before an exam, focus on that core 20% of the curriculum that keeps showing up year after year after year, and that invariably create 80% of the marks that's going to be on the paper. You see, here's a fact. It's highly unlikely, it's possible, but it's highly unlikely that you are going to go and get 100% of all of the questions right in 100% of the tests and exams that you do. There are inevitably going to be questions that are asked that you don't know the answer to. And that's okay. You don't have to be perfect in order to pass and get good grades. You just need to make sure that in those last 24 hours before an exam, rather than trying to learn something new, rather than going after an element of the curriculum that you're unsure about, like for me, I struggled with quadratic equations. And so therefore, what I'm saying to you is, if you haven't got your head around quadratic equations before the last 24 hours before a test or an exam, that is not the time to be focused on that bit of the curriculum. If you do that, you're likely to create doubt and uncertainty that makes it really hard to perform at your best when you're in the exam. So, like I've said, figure out ahead of time what's the 20% of the curriculum that shows up 80% of the time, and in the last 24 hours, focus on revising that bit. Focus on reminding yourself and recalling and recovering all those bits, the 20% that shows up 80% of the time. Once you've got your mind sorted out and you're focused on the strong parts of the curriculum, that 20% that keeps showing up a lot, then what you need to do is you need to get your body sorted out. It does not make sense for you to be staying up till 1 a.m, 2 a.m, 3 a.m. the night before a test or an exam, because that will create an energy depletion so that it becomes really difficult for you to focus and concentrate when you're in the exam the following morning. You need to have done the majority of your studying in the days, weeks and months beforehand. And if you're finding it necessary to be cramming at the last minute till midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, is because you didn't do the work early enough. So start your studies early. That means that when you actually get to the last 24 hours before a test or an exam, you can look after your body and your energy levels by doing a few simple things. First of all, it's important that you get the right fuel on board. Lots of students skip meals. They'll skip breakfast so they can do some extra studying. They'll skip lunch so they can do some extra studying. They'll skip dinner so they can do some, you got it, extra studying. And by depriving the mind of the nutrients it needs, by not getting on the fuel that you need to be able to concentrate and perform well, means that when you get into the test and exam, you find it difficult to concentrate, recall the information that's in your brain, and therefore you get a lower grade than you were capable of. So it's really important every day, not just in the last 24 hours, but particularly in the last 24 hours before a test and exam, that you give your body the fuel it needs. Please make sure you hydrate your body. On average, we need around about 2 litres of water per day. This helps us concentrate for longer periods of time. And I suggest that you sip that over an extended period of time. That's normally about 8 decent-sized glasses of water. And the opposite of that would be to put lots of sugary drinks and caffeine-type drinks in your body. That creates the illusion of energy, where you get an energy spike, but when the sugar and the caffeine starts to go out of your system, you get an energy crash, and that causes you a problem when you actually get into the test and exam type situation. So, make sure you hydrate your body. Then make sure you're eating the right types of energy food. Again, avoid the sugar. I'm not going to go into lots of detail because we're going to cover some foods, brain foods, in future episodes. But what I will say is this. For breakfast, oats, porridge is really good. It doesn't spike your energy levels too much. If you're going to have sugar, I would encourage you to have it in a natural form of honey. Honey is really good. It also is good for your immune system. So you're going to be able to help fight off various bacteria and colds and those sorts of things that sort of drain you of your energy and make it difficult to concentrate. So, porridge, honey, and the other thing I want to say to you is bananas. All right, you'll notice that if you're ever watching professional tennis players, they'll often eat bananas in the breaks between sets of tennis because it's a great source of energy. It doesn't spike your blood sugar levels too quickly, and it releases the energy into your system over a more extended period of time. So, hydrate, get yourself some porridge for breakfast with some honey, and munch on those bananas, and you'll be looking after your energy levels. Before we move on to the next category of what to do in the last 24 hours before a test or an exam, I just want to give you one final thing to do with your body. You see, a lot of teenagers tell me that they find it difficult to get to sleep the night before an important test or an exam. Has that ever happened to you? I know that it happened to me. At least it used to happen to me until I learned this technique that I now call the 1 hour wind down. You see, it's unrealistic to keep studying right up till bedtime and then get into bed and expect yourself to nod off quickly. If you've been studying, let's say you want to go to sleep at 10:30, and you say, right, I'm going to study all the way up to 10:25, and then you stop work, brush your teeth and go straight to bed, you're not going to nod off straight away, or it's unlikely, because you've been stimulating the brain. It's got all these thoughts and all these ideas. And you need to have this, what we call a 1 hour wind down. So if you know that you need to be asleep at 10:30 so that you can get your 8 hours of sleep and perform at your best the following day, what I'm suggesting you do is that you finish work at the latest at 9:30 the night before an important test or an exam. And then in that last hour, what you do is slowly wind your body down, and then you drift off to sleep at around about 10:30. Here's how I do it. The first thing that I do is I will consume some comedy. You see, it's very difficult to be anxious and laugh at the same time. It's difficult to be stressed about something while you're giggling about something simultaneously. And so what I'll do is after I finish work, I'll watch some comedy or I'll listen to some stand-up comedy. And that laughter makes me feel calm. It takes the stress of the exam away. Then what I do is I run a hot bath. And I've got to tell you, I'm really in touch with my feminine side when it comes to this, because I'll dim down the lights, I'll put a few candles on, I'll have some bubble bath in there, and I'll have a nice long soak in the bath. Now, what's really important at this point in time is that you've switched off all of the screens, television screens, computer screens, laptops, iPads, smartphone, whatever it may be. Switch off those screens, because the glare that comes from the screens stops your brain from releasing melatonin. And it's the melatonin that your body needs to release as a sign and a signal that it's time to go to bed and fall off to sleep. So switch off the screens and listen to the comedy, and while you're in the bath, you can keep listening to the comedy, or if you want to, instead, you could read a book. And now that book is nothing to do with the national curriculum. It's pure fiction. It could be an autobiography, or it could even be some comedy that you're reading. It's just that by being in the warm bath, the temperature starts to feel a little bit soporific, and it starts to relax you. It starts to make you want to feel like you want to go to sleep. And then when you're reading, that starts to make your eyelids a little bit tired as well, which also makes it easier to drift off to sleep. After you've been in the bath for about 20, 30 minutes at the most, you get yourself out, dry yourself off, cool down, let your body temperature go down. Maybe have a little glass of water, and then you head off to bed. Now, all this time, you've dimmed the lights, so you haven't got bright lights glaring at you, and all of these little signals are telling your brain it's time to get ready to go to sleep. And when I get into bed, then what I do is I'll read for maybe another 2 or 3 pages. Like I said, an autobiography, some fiction, or a funny book. And those last 2 or 3 pages tend to tip me over the edge and my eyelids start to go. So I put the book down, switch the bedside light off, and off I go to sleep. Now, I've been practicing this technique for many years now, and it's very, very rare that I'll be in bed for more than 5-10 minutes at the most before I nod off. We call it the 1 hour wind down. And that then enables you to drift off easily and get those essential 8 to 9 hours of sleep that you need so you can wake up the next day, feel bright, feel refreshed, energetic, and therefore able to perform at your best and concentrate well in the test or the exam. Practice it, folks. It's the 1 hour wind down. The final tip that I want to give you in this what to do in the last 24 hours before an important test or an exam is all to do with your emotions. And it's important that on an exam day, you have that feeling of certainty, that confidence that you can do well, that you can do it, that you can succeed. And the biggest thing that can start to create doubt and stress are the people that are around you. So in the last 24 hours before an important test or an exam, dump the Dementors. You know what I mean? You know those characters? What's the movie now? The story series? You got it. That's right. Harry Potter. And in the Harry Potter book series, in those movies, there's these characters called the Dementors. And what do? That's right. They suck the soul out of you. They suck the joy of life out of you. Now, every community has these kind of Dementor characters. Obviously not real ones from Harry Potter, but you know what I mean. People that just suck the joy out of an experience. They're so negative. They're so critical. You know, if the glass is half full, they'll call it half empty. You know, if there's something to complain about it, they'll find it, and they'll find something else to moan and complain about as well. You need to get rid of these negative people and avoid them like the plague in the last 24 hours before an important test or an exam. You cannot afford the luxury of negativity, right? You can't afford to indulge in that pessimism. And so, if you have a friend that's like that, avoid them in the last 24 hours before a test or an exam. If you've got a family member, avoid them. And instead, surround yourself with positive people. And this goes for every element of the last 24 hours. Don't be communicating with them on Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, or any other social media. Don't be calling them. Don't be hanging out with them at school, at lunchtime. Certainly, never ever on the morning of the exam go and line up outside the exam room next to one of these Dementor kinds of people. They'll be saying it to themselves inside their head and out loud. Oh no, not another exam. Oh no, what if we fail? Oh, what's the point in doing this anyways? Oh, you know the kind of person I'm talking about. Avoid these people. they'll only create doubt that's unnecessary and that will cause you to, potentially underachieve and fail in the exam. So avoid the negative people and instead surround yourself with positive people. Those kind of people that encourage you, that support you, that say things like, I believe in you. You can do it. Surround yourself with those kind of people. In fact, in the last 24 hours before a test or an exam, if you don't know any positive people, you're better off being alone than you are being around dementors. Heck, if you need to, put on some of our podcasts. Let me keep you company and put some positive thoughts into your head right before your tests and exams. There you go, folks. You've got some simple things to do. Look after your mind by focusing on the 20% of the curriculum that turns up most of the time. Look after your body by fueling it and using the 1 hour wind down. And look after your emotions by staying away from the dementors and surrounding yourself with positive people. The ideas that I've shared with you today in this episode are actually some of the strategies that I share in my Exam SOS seminar. And if you'd like me to come to your school and share my techniques, not just the ones in this episode, but the other ones that help students make quicker progress and achieve better grades, if you'd like me to come to your school, then please do invite me. I'd love to come. The way you do that is simply send an email to podcast@unstoppableteen.com. In fact, if you've got any questions and there's anything you'd like us to help you with, if you've got some concerns or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, then send us an email to podcast@unstoppableteen.com. I'd like to ask you a favour. If you know any young people that are taking tests and exams in the next few days, weeks, or even months, please share this episode with them. You know that you can find this episode now on unstoppableteen.com/41. That's where you'll find the show notes to today's episode. It's episode 41, so you'll be able to get all of the content from today's show, including the audio recording that you're listening to. You can get it at unstoppableteen.com/41. If you prefer, you can listen via iTunes. You can also get it now on YouTube. That's where we've gone. We're putting the podcast onto YouTube, so feel free to subscribe on those channels and you'll never miss an episode ever again. Now, last thing before I wrap up, we've decided to create a special free webinar for teachers. We are on a mission here to go the extra mile to help 1 million young people experience a better quality of life. And we know that the quality of education that we get does have an impact on our future life chances, the kinds of jobs and careers that we can get. So we want to help as many students as possible get the best grades that they can get. So we've created a new free webinar, and it's for teachers only. We'll be creating other stuff for parents and for students too, but this one is for teachers only. If you are a teacher, or if you know a teacher, please go to unstoppableteen.com/progress. And that's where you can register for our new free webinar, totally free. And in that webinar, I'll be sharing 8 proven strategies that we know through independent research are proven to accelerate students' progress and achievement. So if you're a teacher and you want to accelerate the progress and achievement of your students, go to unstoppableteen.com/progress to register for our new free webinar. I hope you found this useful. Please go ahead, subscribe on the channels that we've mentioned, share the episode with other people, and I look forward to returning again next week, where there'll be another new episode to help you become truly unstoppable. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.